My name is Alexis Manning, and the day I stopped trying to earn my mother's love was the same day she asked a stranger to move me out of her hospital room. I was 42 years old, a decorated ATF special agent in charge overseeing the Phoenix Field Division, and I had just flown in from intercepting a major interstate firearms trafficking operation. I still had desert dust on my boots when I walked into St. Joseph's Medical Center, expecting the usual cool reception from my family, but hoping, stupidly, always stupidly hoping, that a medical emergency might soften the decades of ice between us. It didn't. My mother, Eleanor, had suffered a minor stroke. Not life-threatening, the doctors assured us, but serious enough to warrant immediate family presence. My older brother, Trevor, was already there when I arrived, looking every bit the golden child in his tailored suit, fresh from his corporate law office downtown. My younger sister, Brittany, showed up 20 minutes after me, tears streaming down her perfect face, her tech startup CEO husband, Nathan, trailing behind with their matching designer athleisure and concerned expressions. I was wearing jeans and a plain black jacket. My hair was pulled back in the same practical ponytail I'd worn since academy days. I had a scar along my left jawline from a raid gone wrong in Albuquerque, and my hands were calloused from years of weapons training. Next to Brittany's porcelain skin and Trevor's polished veneer, I looked exactly like what my mother had always said I was: rough, unrefined, a disappointment. "Oh, Alexis," my mother said when she saw me, her voice weak but still capable of that particular tone, the one that made my name sound like an apology. "You didn't have to come all this way." "Mom, you had a stroke," I said quietly, moving to her bedside. "Brittany's here, and Trevor, that's sufficient." The word sufficient hung in the air like a slap. Trevor shifted uncomfortably. Brittany pretended to be very interested in adjusting our mother's blankets. I'd heard variations of this my entire life. When I graduated high school with a 4.0 and a full ride to Arizona State, my mother had sighed and said, "Well, at least you got something." When Trevor had gotten into Yale Law, she'd thrown a garden party. When Brittany had married Nathan, whose family owned half of Scottsdale, my mother had cried tears of joy and told everyone her youngest daughter had made it. When I joined the ATF, she'd asked why I couldn't have at least become a teacher. But it wasn't the career that bothered her most. It was me. It had always been me. I was the daughter born with a port wine-stained birthmark that covered part of my neck and crept up toward my left ear. God's cruel joke. I'd once heard her tell her sister when I was 7, thinking I was out of earshot. I wasn't. My mother had spent thousands on laser treatments when I was young, dragging me to appointment after appointment, each one more painful than the last. The birthmark faded but never disappeared, and eventually she gave up, on the treatments, and on me. Trevor was handsome, charismatic, built like our father. Brittany was delicate and beautiful, with our mother's fine bone structure and easy grace. And then there was me, broader in the shoulders, stronger in the jaw, marked and scarred and never quite fitting into the narrative my mother had written for her children. "You should go back to work, Alexis," my mother said after a long silence. "I'm sure you have important things to do." "I'm staying," I said. Her face tightened. "Trevor, would you—" "Mom," Trevor interrupted gently, "let her stay." It was the kindest thing my brother had said to me in years, and it cost him. My mother's displeasure radiated through the room like cold wind. The next 3 days were a masterclass in subtle cruelty. My mother spoke to Trevor about his cases, to Brittany about her children, my niece and nephew, whom I barely knew because family gatherings rarely included me. When nurses came in, she introduced Trevor as my son, the attorney, and Brittany as my daughter, married to the Nathan Foster, you know the Fosters. I was my other daughter, or sometimes just Alexis, with no additional context, as if I'd simply materialized fully formed with no accomplishments, no history, nothing worth mentioning. On the 3rd day, Brittany's husband Nathan finally asked me directly what I did for work. We were in the hospital cafeteria, and I think he was just trying to be polite. "I'm with ATF," I said. "Oh, like administrative stuff?" "Not exactly." Brittany laughed, that high, tinkling laugh that had charmed every room she'd ever entered. Alexis does something with guns, I think. Mom's never really explained it. Honestly, I try not to think about it too much. It's so masculine. The word landed like she intended it to. I was masculine. Too broad, too strong, too marked, too much. Never enough. I investigate illegal firearms trafficking, I said evenly. Interstate operations, straw purchases, gun running to prohibited persons and criminal organizations. Nathan nodded politely, already losing interest. That's great. Important work, I'm sure. Trevor joined us then, and the conversation shifted to his latest case, something high-profile involving a corporate merger. I let the words wash over me, and thought about the operation I'd left behind in Phoenix. 3 states, 2 years of investigation, 17 arrests, and enough illegal firearms to supply a small army. The Phoenix division had the highest seizure rate in the Southwest region under my command. I'd received a commendation from the deputy director himself just 2 months ago. None of that mattered here. Here I was just the daughter with the birthmark who'd never married well, never produced grandchildren, never softened into something acceptable. That night my mother's condition worsened slightly, nothing critical, but enough to warrant keeping her another few days. The hospital staff suggested we go home, rest, rotate. Who stayed with her? I'll stay, I said. Alexis, really, that's not necessary, my mother began. I'm staying. Something in my voice made her stop. Maybe it was the tone I used with non-compliant subjects during interviews. Maybe it was just exhaustion finally bleeding through. Either way, she pressed her lips together and turned her face toward the window. I stayed in that uncomfortable hospital chair all night, dozing intermittently, waking every time a nurse came in. Around 3 a.m., my mother woke up and looked at me in the dim light. You're still here, she said. She sounded surprised. I said I would be. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, when you were born, the first thing I saw was that mark on your neck. The doctor said it was harmless, but all I could think was that everyone would stare. Everyone would know something was wrong. I'd never heard her say it out loud before. The truth had always been there, hovering in her silences and sighs, but hearing the actual words was different. Nothing's wrong with me, Mom, I said quietly. I tried so hard to fix it, but you were always so stubborn about everything. Your hair, your clothes, your choices. My choices, I repeated. You mean my life. I mean, you could have had an easier path. You chose to make everything harder. I stood up. I'm going to get some coffee. I didn't come back for 2 hours. When I did, Trevor was there, and he looked at me with something like pity. I hated it. My mother was discharged on Friday afternoon. We drove her back to her house, the same house we'd grown up in, a beautiful Spanish colonial in Paradise Valley with a pool and a view of Camelback Mountain. I'd helped buy it, actually, when my father died, and the finances were tight, but that was never mentioned. Trevor's name was on the deed as co-owner, a gift from our mother for his 30th birthday. The house filled with people that evening. Friends from my mother's book club, neighbors, members of her church. Everyone fussing over her, bringing casseroles and flowers. Brittany held court in the living room, explaining the medical details to everyone with dramatic flair. Trevor played host, charming and gracious. I stayed in the kitchen, helping set out food, washing dishes, being useful in the way I'd always been useful, quietly, in the background, unremarked upon. That's when I heard it. 3 children, my mother was saying to her friend Patricia, a woman I'd known my entire life. Trevor's doing wonderfully, of course. Partner at his firm now, and Brittany just gave me my 2nd grandchild, another beautiful girl. And your 3rd? Patricia asked. The one in the kitchen? I froze, hands in soapy water. Alexis, my mother said, and the way she said my name, tired, resigned, almost apologetic, made something inside me finally break. Well, she's Alexis. She never quite found her way, No husband, no children. She has some kind of government job, I think, but nothing substantial. And she was born with a terrible birthmark, poor thing. I tried everything to fix it, but, she trailed off, the implication clear. Some things just can't be fixed. In sheath. I dried my hands very carefully. I walked out of the kitchen, through the living room where everyone was laughing and talking, out the front door, and to my rental car. I sat there for 10 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. Then I drove back to my hotel, booked a flight for the next morning, and went back to Phoenix. I didn't call, I didn't text, I just left. 6 weeks later, I was in the middle of a multi-agency briefing, FBI, DEA, U.S. Marshals, Phoenix PD, when my phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. Mom's having a celebration dinner Friday night, her full recovery. She'd like you to come? She'd like, not I'd like, not we want you there. Just the obligatory invitation to her other daughter. I almost didn't respond. Then I thought about that hospital room, that kitchen, that lifetime of being the broken thing they couldn't fix. I'll be there, I texted back. The dinner was at the Sanctuary Resort, a high-end venue with views of the valley, very much my mother's style, elegant, expensive, exclusive. When I arrived, wearing simple black slacks and a white blouse, I could feel the atmosphere shift. Brittany looked me up and down, with barely concealed disappointment. Trevor at least smiled. My mother, radiant in a silk dress, gave me a perfunctory hug. You came. You invited me. Well, yes, it seemed. She waved her hand vaguely. Appropriate. We sat down to dinner, family and a few close friends, 20 people total arranged at a long table. I was seated at the far end, naturally, next to Nathan's elderly aunt who was mostly deaf and couldn't hold a conversation. The meal progressed exactly as I expected. My mother gave a speech about her recovery, thanking Trevor for his legal guidance through her medical directives, thanking Brittany for her emotional support, thanking Nathan for something. I wasn't really listening anymore. Then she raised her glass. To family, she said, looking at Trevor and Brittany, to the people who make life worth living. I raised my glass with everyone else. I even sipped the wine. That's when Trevor's phone rang. He frowned, looked at the screen, and excused himself. He came back 2 minutes later, looking pale. Alex, he said, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. There are federal agents outside. They're asking for you. The table went silent. Federal agents? My mother said, her voice sharp. What did you do, Alexis? I stood up unhurried. Excuse me. I walked through the restaurant, aware of everyone's eyes on my back. Outside, under the resort's warm lighting, stood 3 ATF agents in full tactical gear, along with 2 FBI agents and a Phoenix PD liaison. My incident commander, Agent Rodriguez, stepped forward. Ma'am, he said formally, we have a situation. Suspect from the Durango operation barricaded himself in a residence with hostages. Phoenix SWAT is on scene, but he's specifically asking for you. Won't negotiate with anyone else. How long? 30 minutes. He's armed, ma'am, 4 hostages, including 2 children. I'd worked the Durango case personally. A weapons trafficker I'd interviewed multiple times, built rapport with, eventually turned into an informant before his network discovered his cooperation and marked him. If he was asking for me, it meant he was desperate enough to trust the one federal agent he believed had ever been straight with him. Rodriguez, call ahead. Tell them I'm coming. Full tactical response, but I talk first. Yes, ma'am. I turned back toward the restaurant and found my entire family standing in the doorway, along with most of the dinner guests. My mother looked horrified. Brittany's mouth was actually hanging open. Alexis, my mother hissed, what is the meaning of... Ma'am. Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice carrying the formal authority of federal business. I apologize for the interruption, but we need Special Agent in Charge Manning immediately. Federal emergency. Special Agent in Charge? Nathan repeated. Rodriguez looked at me, then back at my family, and I saw the exact moment he understood the situation. A brief flicker of something crossed his face. Surprise, then a hint of anger on my behalf. He'd been to enough award ceremonies, enough internal meetings, heard enough about my career to know exactly what my family clearly didn't. Yes, sir, Rodriguez said, his voice hardening. SAC Alexis Manning is the head of the ATF Phoenix Field Division, oversees 5 resident offices, manages approximately 75 special agents and support staff, and commands all major firearms trafficking investigations in Arizona, New Mexico, Southern Nevada, and parts of Southern California. The silence was profound. She's also the recipient of the ATF Distinguished Service Medal, the Attorney General's Award for Distinguished Service, and has been shortlisted twice for promotion to Deputy Assistant Director at headquarters. Rodriguez wasn't smiling. We need her. Now. I looked at my mother. Her face had gone completely white. I have to go, I said quietly. You're the head. Trevor couldn't seem to finish the sentence. Yeah, I said, I am. But you never said. You never asked. I looked at each of them in turn. My brother, my sister, my mother. None of you ever asked. Brittany found her voice. But Mom said you had some administrative job. Mom was wrong, I said simply, about a lot of things. My mother made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Alexis, I didn't know. Yes, you did, I said, and my voice was gentle now, almost kind, because the anger had finally burned itself out and left only truth in its wake. You knew I worked for ATF. You knew I was doing well. You just never cared to know the details, because it wasn't the life you wanted for me. None of this was the life you wanted for me. That's not. Ma'am, Rodriguez interrupted, we really need to move. I nodded. I'm coming. I looked at my family one last time. Enjoy your dinner. I turned and walked toward the waiting tactical vehicles. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I had hostages to save and a life to live that had nothing to do with being enough for people who never thought I was. The hostage situation took 6 hours to resolve. I spent 4 of those hours talking to a desperate man through an apartment door, my voice steady and calm while SWAT held position and FBI hostage rescue team waited for my signal. In the end, he released the children first, then the adults, then surrendered to me personally. No shots fired, everyone went home safe. I got back to my apartment at 4 a.m. and found 17 missed calls from Trevor, 8 from Brittany, and 3 voicemails from my mother. I deleted them all without listening. 3 days later, Trevor showed up at my office unannounced. My assistant tried to turn him away, but I told her to let him in. He stood in my doorway, looking around at the commendations on my walls, the photos of me with the ATF director, with the Attorney General leading training exercises, receiving awards. His eyes landed on my credentials displayed in a frame, Special Agent in Charge, Phoenix Field Division. I'm sorry, he said finally. Okay. No, Alex, I mean it. I'm really sorry. I should have. Paid attention? I offered. Yes. He sat down heavily. Mom's devastated. She won't stop crying. Trevor, I don't have the capacity to manage Mom's feelings about discovering I'm successful. I never have. She wants to apologize. I'm sure she does. Now. He flinched. That's fair. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Trevor said, You know what the worst part is? I bragged about you. Back in law school, when people asked about my family, I told them my sister was in federal law enforcement. I thought it was impressive. But then Mom would get so uncomfortable whenever it came up, change the subject, make it seem like it was something to be embarrassed about. And eventually, I just stopped mentioning it. You stopped knowing me, I said quietly. You all did. Because it was easier than dealing with Mom's disappointment that I wasn't who she wanted me to be. The birthmark thing was never about the birthmark, Trevor, not really. It was about control, about having a daughter who fit her narrative. I didn't fit, so I stopped existing in the ways that mattered. He nodded slowly. What can I do? Nothing, I said, not unkindly. This isn't your mess to fix. After he left, I sat at my desk and thought about that little girl with the birthmark, dragged to laser appointments, and told she was something that needed fixing. I thought about the teenager who threw herself into school and sports and everything she could control because she couldn't control how her own mother looked at her. I thought about the young woman who joined ATF, partly because she wanted to serve, and partly because she wanted to prove she was worth something. And I thought about the woman I'd become, scarred and marked and strong and accomplished and still, somehow, enough, always enough. Just not for them. And that was okay. My mother's handwritten letter arrived at my office 2 weeks later. 4 pages, front and back, her elegant cursive covering every inch. She apologized, she explained, she cried in ink. She said she'd been blind, that she'd let her own vanity and narrow worldview poison her relationship with her daughter. She said she was proud of me. She said she loved me. I read it twice, then put it in my desk drawer. Maybe someday I'd be ready to answer it. Maybe someday I'd be ready to rebuild something with her, with all of them. But that day wasn't today. Today, I had a division to run, agents to supervise, and criminals to catch. I had a life I'd built from scratch, a career I'd earned through blood and sweat and relentless determination. I had respect from my colleagues, trust from my team, and a reputation that preceded me in every room I walked into. I didn't need my mother's approval anymore. I'd found something better, my own. 6 months later, I was promoted to Deputy Assistant Director and transferred to ATF headquarters in Washington, D.C. Brittany called to congratulate me, awkward but genuine. Trevor sent flowers. My mother left a voicemail asking if I'd come home for Christmas. I deleted it. But I saved the next one, where she called just to say she'd been thinking about me. And the one after that, where she asked about my work, really asked, wanting to know the details. Small steps. Maybe that's all we'd ever have. Maybe that would be enough. Or maybe not. Either way, I was finally, completely, entirely free.